Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're here with comic Jeff Scherer. Jeff Scherer, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great.
Am I saying your name right? It's rhymes with mirror, you told me, and I think
I
would be Scherer.
Yes, Scherer.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not exactly probably the proper German pronunciation.
Okay.
But
well, as a German, I appreciate the tutorial. And then where can people see you do stand-up comedy or improv, musical improv, on stage in New York City, People's Improv Theater, and where can they find you online?
They can find me online at jeffscherer.nyc. That's JEFFSCHERER. Though that's mostly my business website. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. And then they can see you do musical improv theater. Is it the Vern Show at the People's Improv Theater?
Yeah, it's called Vern.
Okay.
They're a musical improv group.
And you sing and you make up the story as you go.
I'm with a very talented cast. They're like my family. I love them.
Oh, cool. So you've been with them for a while? It's a long-running show?
Yes.
So are you guys on the striker stage?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, good, because that's like the big time, right?
That's the big time.
And that was me verifying that you are the big time.
Thank you.
Are you on the striker stage?
I am on the striker stage. And weirdly, today, this morning, I had to pick up it's my sister's birthday tomorrow, and my stepmother said, "Hey, can you pick up a pie at 4 and 20 Blackbirds?" And I went to pick up a pie, and someone said, "Hey, you're on Vern." And I was like,
yes,
what? I got recognized
at the pie place, at the artisanal pie place in Brooklyn.
That's right.
I love it.
I was
Only in Brooklyn,
about that, yeah.
But no, everywhere in New York City, because the Vern is one of the longer running shows, and that's why it's on the striker stage.
I'll take it.
Okay. And then what we're going to talk about real quick today is the fact that, well, let's talk about religion versus atheism.
Yes.
And I think I'm religious, and you are the opposite of religious,
great.
which is?
I'm atheist.
You're atheist. Okay.
I'm atheist on the agnostic side. I mean,
that more means you just don't believe anything's out there, etc.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to believe anything's out there.
Okay. Yeah, there probably is not.
Yeah. Well.
What's the reason other than somebody wrote a book? I mean, there's no real proof of anything, right?
I mean, that's mostly it. Like, I to me, and I think some of it is just on a very basic level. Even before I read anything about it, I'll take one step back and say my dad was an atheist.
Oh, okay.
And my mom, raised me in church and that kind of thing. And
weird, really
Episcopalian.
So they kind of cut a deal. They're like, okay, well, if we're gonna have a kid, I get to raise him in the church.
The deal was they got divorced, and then my mom's like, now that we're divorced, I'm taking you to church.
And one of them stuck, and it was your dad's religion, which is atheism. Right?
Yeah, and so like at the beginning, I was like, I was a good student, so like church was like anything else. It was like, hey, you learn things, but it just gradually. It just the logic of it made no sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know that it is logical.
That is true. It is, and that's one of the logical arguments against atheism is there's not supposed to be logic.
Yeah, but also there's a couple big questions that I'm interested in. First of all, is atheism its own religion? And second of all, when I rethink everything, at some point you think, do I believe in God? And for me, it goes back to. The origin of the universe really, to me, makes no sense. It involves, like the way it's taught in science, involves as much faith as religion. In that they're like, okay, well, how did the first, star get formed? Well, there was this black hole. It's like, okay, well, who created that? And it was just always there. And I'm like, well, that requires a little bit of faith, doesn't it?
Certainly. I do agree that that in any kind of non-mathematical sense, nothing about the current scientific consensus for how the universe created doesn't make sense to our brains, and I'm not sure it ever will.
Yeah.
There's something I am one of those people that think that the approach of science is very important to me, which is that you don't assume that everything's right. There is scientific consensus, but it's always being tested.
Yeah, and it's even the evolutionary theory keeps having, if it's the branches of a tree, they keep finding a new branch that throws into question the whole thing. Like, big New York Times, guess what? We just found this fucking thing that made us rethink everything that's been taught in science class.
I read that headline. That was a very long headline.
Dude, they shorten it in the internet age, but back in the day, they were long, and they said something that involved, right? But just like that it's like, should I have learned all this evolutionary science in science class if it's then going to be thrown into question with every new discovery?
But I don't think the major theory is thrown into question. It's always being refined, which is what I like about it. And just the standard for most religions tends to be it's a sin to question the way things. That's maybe not the fairest way to put it, but the idea that there's heresy and that you're supposed to just go along with the way things have been explained to you.
Was your mom Catholic?
No, Episcopalian,
Okay.
which is it's actually a pretty mellow. I mean, not mellow religion, but it's people refer to it as Catholicism without the guilt.
Yeah, we're Lutherans are kind of like
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
Where we don't really hold too many things sacrosanct like the Catholics, and we're a little bit less problematic when it comes to the raising a lot of money to buy a lot of expensive land, a lot of expensive churches, and pay a lot of lawsuits.
Certainly, I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but I've always had this kind of. I've had this sort of poetic theory of why we believe in religion in the first place.
Okay.
And I think it's because human babies, like take a long time to develop, and it's a long time to develop where they have this enormous brain compared to most animals.
Right.
And so they have this experience that affects the way they grow up. And what all of their thought is based on. And that experience is they're lying on their back in a cradle, and they don't have, for a while it feels like they don't have control over anything, before they become toddlers and they think they're the center of the universe. When they're babies, they're just kind of like, oh, I guess these hands are attached to me, and there's all these things, but they're mostly helpless, and when they're hungry or they're uncomfortable or they're sick, they call out into the world.
Right.
They basically call out for help. And help comes from above.
Yeah.
Your mother just appears, or your father comes up and just comes and scoops. And so one of the very first lessons we learn is to just call out up to some
up to the
creature
heavens,
above
right.
us
Yeah.
and get what we want.
Yeah, even like I was on a plane and I told a niece that I was like, oh, it's above the clouds, and she goes, but isn't heaven up there? I was like, there's a lot of clouds. Because I think
exactly.
that might be a teaching tool early on that God actually sits on the clouds or whatever. But if that's one of the things that it's natural to call upon the looking towards the heavens, does atheism share any of the same attributes as religion?
I don't. Well, so I wouldn't in any way call it a religion.
Okay.
It is an absence of religion.
Okay.
And I don't understand atheists who have to spend all their time shitting on religion.
Yes, I would think some of them approach. So I guess you might be slightly more agnostic than atheists, but the hardcore atheists, the ones that are out there preaching atheism, are they kind of religious in that regard?
I don't think so. I mean, I have a problem with anyone who can't question any belief.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to.
And so if they're not questioning the central tenets of the atheist church,
sure.
if they can't question then there's a little
yes.
problem. Yeah. But even they're like Church of Satan, like they're kind of making, they're doing certain demonstrative things for comedy purposes or for
I think so,
satire or whatever, and they're like, oh, there's a Church of Satan, and we want to be taken seriously under the laws of the U.S. or whatever.
I don't even really think they do, though. I think it's all playfulness and kind of subversion on their part. But it sounds fun. But
you like that. You like taking apart things in part because you are a comedian, and is that how you kind of write jokes, taking things apart?
I think so. Yeah. Like for me, it's and I think a lot of comedians do that. They see the there's the little questions behind every assumption that if you start breaking apart those assumptions, that's where the comedy is, because it's your mind having like a reaction, like, oh my God, wait a minute,
it's true. I believe this thing, and he just questioned all those assumptions. That's pretty surprising and funny.
The gesture speaking truth to power sort of thing, and that part of it is really interesting. But I don't advocate being a jerk. I think I learned pretty early on. I think I was a nascent jerk as a teenager, and I think I remember when I was like protesting a long ago war that
now looks tame compared to the Trump era, right?
Yeah, and it was actually my own church, the Episcopalian Church, was right there on the front lines with us, fighting for peace, and honestly, it taught me a little humility in that, Well,
I also like that, like you can, you saw some humility in the church, but then also that church, the Episcopalian Church, can learn a little bit from your picking things apart.
Oh yeah, I hope so.
Or not saying that you're a heretic if you do.
I hope so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like us all to work together, and it's the same thing with anything. Like right now, I think with Bernie on Twitter, fans on Twitter, there's a part where you just want to be like, guys, you're saying a lot of right things, but don't come after everybody. You're trying to win people to your side.
Yeah, and I think they were saying something like Bernie can't win if he keeps it. If he and his people keep attacking the Democratic Party.
Right, and it doesn't help that there are Russian bots being half of them. But,
yeah, they want a certain result. So what on stage and improv or whatever, are you questioning certain the assumptions you're questioning? What area are they in? Is it necessarily religion or other things?
I think when I'm on stage, I don't know. I think the way I approach it is more playing the things that are taken for the types and the characters that are taken for granted, and just playing up their ridiculousness a little bit.
Like what, politics or like religion?
I don't think we do a ton of politics, and well, some of us do, but
because it's improv, it might depend on what what objects you're throwing out. But exactly. you have power over what if they shout out a bunch of things. Well, you guys are like, I want to be political. You guys are just going to kind of select a political.
I think we definitely have some very fierce feminists on our team, which is
good.
Which I like.
Good. You're not questioning assumptions for feminism, are you?
But
not during the team.
Not at all.
That's why you guys have lasted for years and are on the striker stage at the pit.
If I have a logical problem with feminism, I mean, with any aspect of a feminist argument now, I'm totally pro-feminist.
Yeah, but please say it here. Please say
it here.
What are the assumptions you would question?
I consider myself a feminist, but like anything, I think there are times when you want to be like, the way you're saying that doesn't make sense. But a lot of times now it's just like, that's a thought you can keep in your head. Because there's only so much you can argue logic.
And so are you finding, though, that like, the jerk that you were back in the day, Jeff Scherer, like, did you find that, at some point I discovered that audiences don't like it as much?
Oh, certainly.
And so you kind of adapted to, keep certain things in your mouth.
I don't think it's audience first, though, for me. I mean, yes, there is some of that. Like, I flirted with stand-up for a while, and I learned very quickly, like, don't lead with, like, sarcasm against everybody. Like, make people like you first before you can challenge them to, come to an idea.
And did that carried over in improv?
Yeah, I think so. Or improv might have just followed everything else, honestly. I think it's me becoming a more mature person, which I'm one of those firm believers. You just have to constantly be doing that. If I'm 60 and I'm not more advanced than I was when I was 52, then I've failed.
You have failed.
You got to keep doing it. And I think that's probably the thing I believe most in life. It's like science. Your personality is like scientific things that have to be challenged and tested, and also everything has to be done with empathy towards others, and even empathy towards, which is the hard part, empathy towards people who seem like monsters. You have to kind of sometimes you just have to see where they're coming from and what their experience is. Even somebody
like Trump or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard.
And so does that permeate your team, which is the Vern team at the pit? The fact that you guys are all kind of, let's not be reflexively, I hate this guy, he's awful. Let's try to be a little bit more nuanced and human.
I think one thing that we do, and I'm not going to claim that we're, doing like very high philosophy.
Striker stage, bro. Striker stage.
But I think one thing that we do is, we're a very I've been on all sorts of teams, and this team is so accepting of other people's ideas.
Okay.
And we do that all the time on stage. So, and I like to push for, especially because we're doing narrative, we're making up musicals on the spot.
Yeah.
A big part of us is, like, one thing I always push for is doing narratives that are based on narratives we all know, the stories we all know.
Yeah.
If it's a romantic comedy plot, do it like a romantic comedy plot. But then all the parts that pull apart romantic comedy don't have to happen in the structure, but they happen in just the dynamics between the characters, because we're not those people.
Yeah.
And I think that happens whether we're doing a fairy tale or a thriller assassination story or, just whatever. Like, keep the story kind of, it's like when you're doing when classical composers do a violin quartet.
Okay.
They're like, I like the limits of saying, like, well, I'm going to do, Beethoven or Schoenberg or whoever it is. We're doing 2 violins and a cello and a whatever it's called, a bass viol or whatever. We're doing
big-ass violin.
Yeah, the big-ass violin. And we're doing those 4 instruments, but, like, what we do with those 4 instruments are completely different.
Oh, good. And then, like, so what that's probably the best advertisement for the Vern team at the People's Improv Theater is the fact that you just mentioned things like romantic comedy, assassination thriller.
Yes.
And then there was a third one. I was just like, you guys are doing all those things?
Fairy tales, yeah.
Fairy tales, yeah. And those are kind of assumptions that you could question. Those are certain formulaic things that you could toy with.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think it's. I think a lot of musical improv teams do that. The genre is very important to them because it gives you a grounding. Because you don't want to spend, when you're doing improv, you don't want to spend the whole time thinking like, oh, what's going to happen next in the plot? Because that's not where the joy lives in the improv.
Yeah.
You're going to stumble into things just out of saying crazy stuff, but like having the structure of knowing that, this is a boy meets girl, girl is, boy, whatever, boy loses girl.
And I would think
girl loses boy, there's 2 boys and a girl, and they're all non-binary, whatever, like that, but all that stuff, like, if you keep that structure, then you have so much more room to play.
And I would think it's difficult anyway because you're also fitting it into music. It's musical improv.
Yes.
So like you already got to start rhyming the words and you have to be able to sing it and stuff like that. And so if they want to figure out the next one that's coming up, is it a regular monthly show with the date coming up is?
It's weekly, every Wednesday.
Oh,
at
weekly?
7, yeah.
So meaning you write, I guess it's not writing, so it's not
We're not
sketch.
writing.
It's not sketch. And so that allows you to do a weekly show.
Yeah.
Because some of the sketch people, they're like, we work on it for months and then it's just done. And
no, we don't work nearly that hard.
For a weekly?
We rehearse, but that is the joy of improv, getting to see a different show every week, and and let's say 5 out of 6 of them are good.
Yeah, and so to find out the next one that's going to be great, they're going to go to Jeff Scherer across all social media.
I would just go find Vern Improv on Facebook or
and it's probably all over the Pitts calendar because it's a weekly show that's been long running.
Yes,
cool.
Jeff Scherer. Otherwise, go to 420 Blackbird's Pie in Brooklyn and ask the person working the counter.
Dude, look everywhere because this guy's starting to be recognized.
Yeah,
that means you got to see him. Jeff Scherer, thank you so much.
Thank you.